Don't talk. Waitress saved Vampire King at restaurant after she caught something shocking. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It was just another night at the upscale restaurant in downtown Manhattan, where Maya worked tirelessly as a waitress. The air inside was thick with the scent of freshly prepared gourmet dishes, the clinking of fine china, and the soft murmur of high-class patrons enjoying their meals. Maya, however, was used to the routine, having worked here for over a year. She'd learned how to navigate the crowds, how to balance the weight of trays stacked with delicate appetizers and perfectly poured wine. She had a quiet routine, always making sure she wasn't noticed too much. But tonight was different. There was a strange tension in the air that she couldn't quite place. She brushed it off at first, attributing it to the usual pre-dinner rush. However, something was undeniably off about one particular table. It was a corner booth, tucked away in the shadows, away from the bustling crowd. At that table sat a man whose presence seemed to command the space. His sharp, ice-blue eyes were fixed on the menu in front of him, yet there was an unsettling stillness about him. His suit was black, impeccably tailored, and he looked out of place in this vibrant, modern restaurant. There was an eerie calm about him, and the way he sat, poised, made Maya feel uneasy. She approached his table to take his order, her steps tentative. As she did, she noticed the tension building around him. The staff seemed to avoid him, the other patrons too absorbed in their own affairs to look up. But the man was watching her, a flicker of recognition in his gaze that sent a chill down her spine. "What can I get for you tonight, sir?" Maya asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man's lips curled slightly into a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'll have the finest wine you have," he said, his voice smooth like velvet, yet cold. Maya nodded, but before she could turn away, she noticed something strange. A faint rustle in the corner of her eye caught her attention. 3 men standing just outside the restaurant's entrance, their eyes fixed on the man in the booth. They weren't dressed like ordinary patrons. Their clothes were dark, their postures rigid, almost military. Maya's heart skipped a beat as she realized they were watching the man intently, waiting for something to happen. She turned back to the table, hoping to dismiss the thought. But the man's gaze was unwavering, locking with hers. She couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to unfold right before her eyes. The air seemed to grow heavier, thick with unspoken tension, as if the world outside had paused for a brief moment. Maya's instincts were screaming at her to turn and run, but instead, she remained frozen, caught in the man's cold stare. Then, as if on cue, one of the men near the entrance made his move. He walked toward the table, his eyes narrowed, his steps deliberate. Maya felt a strange pull in her chest, urging her to act, to do something, anything. Without thinking, she stepped forward, just as the man at the table raised his hand, silently signaling for her to stop. The man's voice was barely a whisper, but it felt like thunder in the silent room. "Don't talk," he said. The command was so forceful, so unexpected, that Maya's mind went blank. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The men from earlier were closing in, and she realized with a cold jolt that they weren't here for dinner. They were here for him. She had no idea who this man really was or why he was so important, but one thing was clear. His life was in danger, and she had somehow become involved in a situation far beyond her understanding. With the tension rising, Maya had to make a choice: stay silent and watch, or risk everything to save a man she barely knew. The weight of the moment pressed on her, and as she looked back at the man, she could see the faintest flicker of gratitude in his eyes. It was a look that told her everything would change from here on out. And so, with a deep breath, Maya made her decision. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. Tonight, she would save him. As Maya stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest, the weight of the moment began to settle in. The man at the table, the one who had silently commanded her to stay quiet, was no ordinary person. She had realized that much by now. His cold, amber eyes seemed to hold centuries of secrets, and the way his presence dominated the room, like a shadow that stretched across everything, made it clear that he was someone powerful, someone dangerous. The men at the door were still advancing, but now, they were no longer just a threat to him. They were a threat to her as well. Maya didn't know why she was involved in this. She didn't know who this man was, or why she felt such a strong pull to protect him, but her instincts had already taken over. She couldn't let him face this danger alone. Without thinking, she stepped closer to the table, her hand trembling as it rested on the edge of the chair. The man's gaze shifted slightly, acknowledging her presence, but he said nothing. His eyes were telling her something she couldn't quite understand yet, but it was clear. The danger was real. The air in the restaurant had changed. The once cozy, upscale ambience had become suffocating, as if the walls were closing in. Maya glanced over at the door where the three men were now standing, their eyes locked on the man in the booth. They were moving toward him, their hands subtly reaching under their coats, where Maya could see the glint of something metallic. It was now or never. She couldn't let these men get any closer. Just as one of them took a step toward the table, Maya moved instinctively. She didn't know what she was going to do. She wasn't trained to deal with this kind of danger. But she had to try. "I'll help you," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. The man at the table did not react immediately. Instead, he simply observed her, his piercing gaze calculating every movement. He didn't say a word, but she could see the faintest flicker of approval in his eyes. Without warning, the man stood up, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the floor. His movements were fluid, almost unnatural, and as he walked toward the men, it was as though the space around him shifted, his presence dominating every corner of the room. Maya watched, mesmerized and terrified at the same time. She had never seen anything like this. The three men had finally reached the table, their hands now clearly holding weapons. But before they could make a move, the man spoke, his voice cold and commanding. "Leave," he ordered, his voice carrying an authority that seemed to make the air crackle with power. For a moment, the men froze. The silence was thick, the tension unbearable. But then, one of them, a taller figure with a scar running across his face, stepped forward, his lips curling into a sneer. "You think you can order us around, vampire?" he spat, his voice dripping with disdain. The man at the table didn't flinch. "I don't think. I know," he said, his voice still as cold as ice. Before Maya could process what was happening, the air seemed to shift again. The man's eyes glowed for a split second, a fiery amber that made Maya's heart skip a beat. It was as if time slowed down, and in that moment, the men who had been advancing were now standing still, their bodies frozen in place. Maya could see their faces, their expressions locked in a moment of shock, as if they couldn't comprehend what was happening. "Get out," the man repeated, his voice now like a low growl, sending a shiver down Maya's spine. The men hesitated, looking between each other, but they didn't move. Then, with a quick, almost imperceptible motion, the man at the table lifted his hand, and the air around them seemed to ripple. Without warning, the men were thrown back, crashing into the restaurant's walls, their bodies slammed against the marble with an unnatural force. The room was silent again, the chaos suddenly gone. The man at the table turned to Maya, his amber eyes now soft, though the intensity of his presence still lingered. "You shouldn't have done that," he said, his voice quieter now, almost regretful. "Why not?" Maya asked, her voice shaky. "You were in danger." He stared at her for a long moment, as if considering her words. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he said, his voice more serious now. Maya swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath. "I don't care who you are. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing." The man was silent for a moment, his eyes studying her, and then he nodded slightly. "You're braver than I thought," he said. There was something almost admiring in his tone. "But you've just crossed into a world you don't understand. A world where the rules are different. Dangerous." Maya could feel her pulse racing, but she didn't regret her decision. She had made her choice, and there was no turning back. "What now?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. The man took a step closer to her, his presence looming, yet there was no malice in his gaze. "Now, you're part of my world," he said softly. "And once you're in, there's no going back." As he said those words, Maya realized that her life, as she knew it, had just changed forever. I stared at him, the vampire king who had just casually tossed three men across the restaurant like rag dolls. My heart was still racing, my hands trembling, and yet, the man before me stood completely calm, as though this was all just another Tuesday evening for him. He turned away from me, glancing at the chaos now unfolding in the restaurant. The broken chairs, the destroyed dishes, the men who were slowly picking themselves up off the ground, clearly shaken. The tension in the room was palpable, but the Vampire King wasn't fazed in the slightest. He looked back at me with those piercing amber eyes, a flicker of something unreadable in his expression. "You shouldn't have stepped in," he said quietly, his voice as cold as the eyes that held me captive. "But I'm grateful you did." His words sent a chill down my spine. Grateful? For what? I had no idea what I had just become part of, but I knew one thing for sure. There was no going back. I had seen things no normal person should ever see, and in a single moment, I had crossed into a world that was far darker and more dangerous than I ever could have imagined. I couldn't just stand by and watch. I found myself saying. The words sounded weak, even to my own ears, but I wasn't sure what else to say. I wasn't a hero, I was just a waitress trying to make it through another shift. But somehow, in that moment, I had done something. Something that had completely shifted the course of my life. "You have no idea what you've just done, do you?" he asked, his voice quieter now, but still carrying an edge of warning. I shook my head slowly, my mind still reeling. "No, I don't," he sighed, a sound filled with both frustration and something else, something almost gentle. "You've just involved yourself in a war, one that has been brewing for centuries. A war between creatures like me and those who would see us destroyed." I felt my breath catch in my throat. A war? Between vampires and who? Who were these people? He seemed to sense my confusion, his eyes softening for a moment. "I'm not your enemy, Maya. But the moment you intervened, you became a target. You've crossed into my world now, and there's no way out." His words settled in my mind, heavy with their implications. My world, the one I had known, the one where I worked a simple job and lived a quiet life, was no longer the same. I was now part of something much bigger and much more dangerous. Before I could process everything, the sound of footsteps interrupted my thoughts. The men who had attacked us earlier were standing up, looking more furious than before. One of them, the leader, wiped blood from his lip and turned toward the Vampire King with a snarl. "This isn't over," he spat, his voice laced with venom. "We'll be back. You can't hide forever." The Vampire King didn't flinch. Instead, he turned back to me, his gaze unwavering. "They'll be back. And so will others. You're a part of this now, Maya. Whether you want to be or not." I couldn't find the words to respond. What could I say? I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to be a part of whatever this was. But in that moment, I knew I had no choice. I had made a decision, and now I had to live with it. The Vampire King moved toward the door, his presence commanding the room. "Come with me," he said, his voice firm, not a question but an order. My instincts screamed to refuse, to run far, far away from all of this. But my body moved before my mind could protest. I followed him, unsure of what the future held, but certain of one thing: my life had changed forever. The Vampire King led me to a private room in the back of the restaurant, one I had never seen before. It was dark, the air heavy with the scent of old books, and something else, something more primal. The walls were lined with shelves, filled with strange artifacts, each one more unusual than the last. He closed the door behind us and turned to face me. "You don't know what you've gotten yourself into, Maya. But I'll make sure you survive." I looked up at him, his figure standing tall and imposing in front of me. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why are you helping me?" He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Because you saved me," he said, his voice softer now, almost reluctant. "And no one has done that in a long time." I felt my heart skip a beat. I had saved him. But why? Was it really as simple as that? Or was there something more to it? Something I didn't yet understand? "What happens now?" I asked, my voice shaking despite myself. "Now, Maya," he said, stepping closer to me, his gaze intense, "you stay alive." I stood there, staring at the Vampire King as his words slowly sank in. "You stay alive." That was all he said, but the weight of it was enough to make my head spin. I had no idea what I was stepping into, no understanding of this world he spoke of, but I knew I had no choice but to go along with it. I had made a decision when I stepped in to help him, and now there was no turning back. How do you expect me to survive in a world I don't understand? I asked, my voice trembling despite myself. The Vampire King studied me for a long moment, his amber eyes never leaving mine. Because you will learn, he said, his tone steady. This world has rules, and if you want to make it, you need to follow them. I felt a chill run down my spine. What rules? And why me? I wasn't trained for anything like this. I wasn't prepared to be part of some ancient war. He turned away, moving toward one of the dark shelves in the room. He pulled out a thick book, its cover worn and old, the pages yellowed with age. This, he said, turning back to face me, is the book of the vampire courts. It's where the rules are written. He handed it to me, and I took it reluctantly. The weight of the book was heavy, both physically and metaphorically. I opened it to the first page, the words written in an ancient script I couldn't understand. You need to learn the rules of this world, he continued. You'll be tested, Maya, and not just by me. I frowned, flipping through the pages. There were so many things I didn't understand, so many names, places, and rituals that were completely foreign to me. What does all of this mean? I asked, looking up at him. The Vampire King's eyes softened slightly, a flicker of something I couldn't name passing through them. It means you've been thrust into a world where the stakes are higher than anything you've ever known. These rules govern everything: power, loyalty, betrayal, life, and death. And now, you're part of it. I felt my heart race. What was I really a part of? I wasn't sure I could handle this, not after everything that had happened so far. But the king's words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I didn't ask for this, I said, my voice small, almost lost in the silence of the room. No one does, he replied, his voice deep and steady. But that doesn't change the fact that you're in it now. His words struck me like a blow. He was right. I had stepped in to help, but I had no idea what I was really getting myself into. I looked down at the book in my hands, the strange, ancient symbols on the pages taunting me. What had I gotten myself into? The Vampire King took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. I know this is a lot to take in, Maya, he said softly, almost kindly. But you'll be safe as long as you stay with me. No one will hurt you while I'm here. I looked up at him, my heart pounding in my chest. Why are you doing this? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. The king didn't immediately answer. He simply stared at me for a long moment, as if weighing his words carefully. Because you saved me, he said finally, his voice low, almost regretful. And I owe you. But I didn't do it for you, I said, feeling the need to explain myself. I just couldn't let them hurt you. It felt like the right thing to do. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. It was the right thing to do, he said, his voice softer now. But it also means you're now part of this world, whether you like it or not. A long silence stretched between us, the weight of his words hanging in the air. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking into the abyss below. I had no idea what this world was, but I knew I was in it now. I had crossed the line, and I didn't know if I could ever go back. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Now, he said, his eyes hardening once more, you start learning. There's no time to waste. They'll come for you, Maya. And when they do, you'll need to be ready. I swallowed hard. Who? The enemies of the vampire courts, he replied. Those who want to see us fall. They'll come after you because of me. And when they do, you'll have to protect yourself. I'll be there to guide you, but ultimately, it's up to you. I nodded slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. I had no idea what I was about to face, but I knew one thing for sure. I had no choice but to face it. The Vampire King had given me a chance, but it was up to me to survive in this world. And I wasn't sure I was ready, but I had no other choice. I'm not afraid, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The king raised an eyebrow, surprised by my response. Good, he said, his tone approving. Because this world doesn't care if you're ready or not. He stepped toward the door, his back straight, his every movement filled with purpose. Come, there's more to learn, and the sooner you start, the better. I followed him, knowing that whatever was ahead, there was no turning back now. This was my life now, for better or worse. I followed the Vampire King through the long, dimly lit corridors of the building, my mind racing with everything he had just told me. I had barely processed what had happened in the restaurant, but now, walking alongside him, I realized this wasn't just some random occurrence. The world I had known, quiet, mundane, was gone, replaced by something dark and dangerous. I was in this now, whether I liked it or not. The Vampire King, or Darius, as I had started to think of him, led me to a small, private office deep within the building. It was sparse, with only a few old chairs and a desk covered in ancient-looking books and scrolls. He motioned for me to sit, and I hesitated before lowering myself into one of the chairs. Darius sat across from me, his expression unreadable. He looked at me for a long moment, as if deciding something in his mind. "You still don't understand the gravity of what you're in the middle of," he said finally. His voice was low, his eyes unwavering. "The vampire courts are not just a group of powerful immortals. We control much more than you think. The world of humans is only a fraction of what's at stake here. And now, you're involved in it." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What does that mean for me?" I asked, barely able to keep the tremor out of my voice. "It means," he said, leaning forward, his eyes locked onto mine, "that you're going to need to learn how to survive in this world. The rules are brutal, and they won't make exceptions for you." He paused, watching me carefully. "But," he added, his tone softening just slightly, "I won't leave you to face it alone." His words were oddly reassuring, yet the weight of them only made everything feel heavier. He wasn't going to protect me forever. I had to learn to protect myself. "How am I supposed to do that?" I asked, frustration creeping into my voice. "You'll learn," he replied, his voice steady. "There are things I'll teach you. But first, you need to understand who you're up against." He stood, pacing around the room, his steps slow and deliberate. "There are factions, groups within the vampire world who will not let this go. The ones who try to hurt me, they were just the beginning." My pulse quickened. "Who are they?" I asked, fear creeping into my voice. "They're called the Inquisitors," Darius said, his voice darkening. "They've been hunting my kind for centuries. And now they know about you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I didn't want to be part of any war, let alone a war against vampires. I wanted to be far away from all of this, back in my quiet little apartment with my ordinary life. But that life was gone, and I was stuck here. Darius stopped pacing and turned to face me. "They'll come for you," he said quietly. "They'll try to use you to get to me. And when that happens, you'll need to be ready." His eyes were hard, unwavering, but there was something else in them now, something that almost looked like concern. "You don't have to do this," I said, my voice trembling. "I didn't ask for this. I never wanted any of it." He studied me for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. "I know," he said. "None of us do. But we don't always get to choose our battles." He walked to the desk and picked up a thick, leather-bound book. It looked ancient, its pages yellowed with age. "This is the Book of the Courts," he said, placing it on the desk in front of me. "It's the key to understanding the rules of our world. It's not an easy read, but it's the first step. You need to understand who you are in this world, Maya. You can't just be a bystander anymore." I reached out and opened the book, my fingers brushing against the brittle pages. The text was written in an unfamiliar language, symbols that looked almost like a mixture of ancient script and something else. "What is this?" I asked, feeling a sudden rush of doubt. "It's the foundation of our world," Darius said, his voice quiet but firm. "And you'll learn it, whether you like it or not. If you want to survive, you need to understand the power structures, the allegiances, the history." "What history?" I asked, my mind reeling. "The history of the vampire courts," he replied. "The rise and fall of kings, the wars fought over centuries. It's all in here. And now, it's your reality." I closed the book slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't just some passing danger. This was something that could change everything about who I was. "I'm not ready for this," I whispered. "No one is," Darius said. "But we don't get to choose." There was a long silence between us, and I realized something. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about something much bigger, something that would force me to change in ways I couldn't even comprehend. "I'll help you," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "But you have to make a choice. You're in this world now, Maya, and there's no going back." The finality of his words hit me hard, but I knew he was right. I couldn't undo what had happened. I couldn't walk away from this. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, my voice trembling but steady. "I'll learn." Darius nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. "Good," he said. "Then let's begin. Because it's going to get worse before it gets better." I didn't know what to expect, but I was sure of one thing. Whatever came next, I was in this fight, whether I was ready or not. I woke up in a cold sweat, my mind racing. The Vampire King had spoken those words the night before, and they echoed in my head as I tried to make sense of everything. There's no going back. No matter how much I wanted to, I couldn't walk away from this world I had found myself in. I had already crossed the line, and now I was tangled in a web of power, secrets, and danger that I could not escape. I glanced at the clock, midnight. The entire building was eerily quiet, save for the occasional hum of machinery and the distant murmur of voices. I could hear my heartbeat in the silence, the sound almost too loud in my ears. The weight of the Vampire King's words settled over me. I had agreed to learn, to train, but how was I supposed to begin? I had no idea where to start. Just the thought of diving into the history of the vampire courts, the politics, the betrayals, none of it made sense to me. But I knew Darius had a point. If I didn't learn, I would be a target, and I'd be as good as dead. A knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. "Come in," I called out, my voice sounding weaker than I intended. The door creaked open, and I saw Darius standing there, his usual composed demeanor in place. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. I nodded slowly, even though I didn't feel ready at all. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said. He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. "Good," he said simply. "Then let's begin." He motioned to a large table covered in scrolls, books, and maps. It looked like the stuff of ancient lore, things you'd expect to find in a museum, not in a modern office. "This," he said, gesturing to the materials, "is where it all starts. The vampire courts are built on ancient power structures. They govern not just vampires, but many other supernatural beings. If you're going to survive in this world, you need to understand these power structures. You need to know who controls what, and who can destroy you." My heart raced again. There was so much to learn, so much I had no idea about. "What do I need to know first?" I asked, trying to steady my nerves. Darius walked over to the table and began flipping through one of the thick, dusty tomes. "The first thing you need to understand is the hierarchy," he said, looking up at me. "Vampires, at their core, are ruled by the ancient families. The kings, the queens, and the noble houses. Each one controls a different aspect of our world." "What aspect do you control?" I asked before I could stop myself. He paused, his eyes meeting mine. "I control power," he said quietly. "The courts, the politics, the decisions that shape this world. But it's not just about power. It's about influence. And influence is everything." I swallowed hard. Everything he said felt like it was just the tip of the iceberg. "How do I fit into this?" I asked, my voice uncertain. "You fit into it whether you like it or not," Darius replied. "You're already a part of this world. And that means you need to understand the dangers, the alliances, and the rivalries. The Inquisitors, for example, they'll stop at nothing to destroy everything we've built. And now, they know about you. They know you helped me." I clenched my fists, the fear starting to crawl back up my spine. "Why are they after you?" I asked, though I was almost afraid to know the answer. Darius sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Because I'm a threat to their control," he said. "The Inquisitors are not just hunters. They're powerful political forces that want to control our world, to bend it to their will. They fear me, Maya, because I can stop them." I tried to wrap my mind around his words. This wasn't just about surviving an attack or two. It was about something much bigger. "So what do we do now?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. "Now," Darius said, his voice hardening, "we prepare. I'll teach you what you need to know, and you'll learn fast. Because the Inquisitors won't wait." He moved toward the desk, picking up one of the ancient scrolls and unrolling it. "The first lesson is about power," he said. "How to harness it, how to protect it, and how to use it. In this world, power is everything. Without it, you're nothing. And I'm not going to let that happen to you." I watched him, trying to absorb his words. The weight of it all seemed so much to handle. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready for any of it. But Darius was right. There was no turning back now. I had to learn. I had to fight. The silence between us stretched as he continued to examine the scrolls. His focus was intense, his every movement precise. "The vampire courts have always been about power, Maya," Darius said, his voice low. "If you want to survive, you need to understand it. Power isn't just about strength. It's about influence. It's about manipulation. And in this world, Those who know how to manipulate the rules are the ones who win. He looked up at me then, his amber eyes piercing. You'll learn quickly, or you'll be crushed. That's the reality of our world. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words. This was my reality now. I didn't know how to survive it, but I knew I had to try. For the first time, I realized that everything had changed. I was no longer just Maya, the waitress. I was part of something much larger, something that could destroy me if I wasn't careful. And if I wanted to stay alive, I would have to learn quickly. Darius wasn't going to hold my hand through this. He was going to teach me, but the rest was up to me. I took a deep breath and steeled myself. There was no going back now. I had no idea what to expect the next day. My body was still adjusting to the shocking reality of the life I had stumbled into. But Darius was right. There was no going back. I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross, and now I had to deal with the consequences. When I walked into the training room, Darius was already there, waiting. The room was lit with dim, golden light, and the scent of old parchment filled the air. Shelves lined with books and ancient scrolls surrounded us. There were maps of the world, strange symbols I couldn't understand, and artifacts that seemed to hum with an energy I couldn't quite place. Darius stood by the table, his posture straight and commanding as always. He didn't look at me when I entered, but I could feel his eyes on me, studying me, assessing me. Today we begin, he said, his voice as firm as steel. This world operates on power, Maya. Understanding how to harness it, how to protect it, is the difference between life and death. I swallowed hard, trying to focus. What do you want me to do? I asked. He glanced up at me, his expression unreadable. First, you need to learn the basics. Power is not just about strength. It's about influence, control, and manipulation. The vampire courts are ruled by those who can command these things. You need to understand the game. I nodded, even though I had no idea what he was talking about. He gestured to a book on the table. Read this, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. It explains the basic principles of our world, the alliances, the rivalries, the balance of power. You need to know who's who and what they want. I picked up the book, flipping through the pages. It was dense, written in a language I could barely understand, with symbols and diagrams I couldn't make sense of. The words seemed to blur together as I read, but Darius stood by, watching me. This isn't going to be easy, he said, his voice softer now, almost as if he was speaking to himself. But you have to learn quickly. The Inquisitors are already aware of you, and they won't wait long to make their move. I felt a chill at the mention of the Inquisitors. The name alone was enough to send a shiver down my spine. Who are they really? I asked, unable to keep the fear out of my voice. Darius sighed, his gaze turning distant. They are a faction within the vampire courts, but they don't follow the old rules. They want control, total control. They believe that vampires should dominate everything, humans included, and they'll stop at nothing to achieve that. My mind was spinning. But why would they come after me? I'm just a waitress. I don't have anything to do with this. Darius turned to face me, his eyes sharp. That's exactly why they'll come after you, he said. You're a weakness, Maya. And in our world, weaknesses are exploited. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. A weakness? What was he talking about? But before I could ask, he continued. The Inquisitors won't hesitate to use you to get to me. They'll threaten you, manipulate you, do whatever it takes to make you a pawn in their game. I felt my pulse quicken. What do I do? I asked, my voice shaking. You learn, Darius said, his voice cold but steady. You learn everything there is to know about this world. The history, the power dynamics, the people involved. And you learn how to protect yourself. Because you will be targeted, Maya. You're already on their radar, and there's nothing you can do to change that. I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. My life was no longer just mine to control. I was caught in something far bigger than myself. And now, I had to fight for survival. Darius's gaze softened slightly, though his expression remained serious. I'll teach you everything you need to know, he said. But you have to promise me something. You need to stay focused. You need to be prepared for what's coming. It's going to be dangerous, and there will be moments when you'll want to give up. But you can't. I looked at him, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on me. I was in this now, whether I liked it or not. I understand, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded once, his expression unreadable. Good. Now let's begin. The next few hours were a blur. Darius taught me about the different vampire factions, the the ancient families that ruled, and the alliances that shaped the world. He showed me maps of territories controlled by different vampire houses and explained the balance of power that had existed for centuries. He spoke of rivalries, betrayals, and wars fought over resources and control. It was a world full of politics and danger, a world that was as ruthless as it was powerful. As the hours passed, I felt my brain starting to ache from the information overload. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Darius was right. If I didn't learn, I wouldn't survive. The vampire world wasn't a place for the weak or the naive. I had to become someone else if I was going to make it. "You're doing well," Darius said at one point, breaking my concentration. I looked up at him, surprised. "Really?" I asked. "You've got a lot to learn, but you're picking it up faster than I expected," he said, his voice almost approving. "I'll make a warrior out of you yet." His words struck something deep inside me. A warrior. Could I really become that? Could I really survive this world? The thought both terrified and intrigued me. There was so much I didn't understand, so much that still scared me. But for the first time, I felt like I was starting to see the bigger picture. And in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them use me. I wasn't going to be a pawn. I was going to learn. I was going to fight. And maybe, just maybe, I'd survive this after all. I woke up early the next morning, the faint light of dawn creeping through the curtains. I had barely slept. The knowledge Darius had shared with me the night before was still swimming in my head. Every page of that ancient book full of secrets I barely understood. I had agreed to learn. I had agreed to survive. But now, sitting on the edge of the bed, I realized just how much of my old life I had left behind. I was no longer just Maya, the waitress. I was part of something much bigger, something that could either break me or make me stronger. There was no turning back. I stood up, my body still sore from the intensity of last night's lesson, and made my way to the training room. Darius was already there, his tall figure silhouetted against the light filtering in from the windows. He didn't look up when I entered, but I could feel his eyes on me, watching my every move. "You're late," he said without a hint of emotion. I didn't know I had a schedule to follow. I replied, trying to mask the nervousness in my voice. "You do now," he said, his voice firm. "You need to be disciplined. In this world, time is one of the few things you can't afford to waste." I nodded, biting back a retort. He was right. I had no idea how much time I had left before the Inquisitors or whoever else was lurking in the shadows would come for me. "Let's begin," he said, turning toward a large wooden crate in the corner of the room. He gestured for me to follow. I had no idea what was inside, but I wasn't about to question him. I had already learned that much. Darius opened the crate with ease, revealing a variety of weapons. Swords, knives, and some I couldn't even recognize. "These are tools," he said, picking up a long, curved sword. "Tools to survive. You won't always have your powers, Maya. Not everyone in this world will rely on magic. Some will fight with what they have, and you need to learn how to fight back." I looked at the weapons, feeling a knot form in my stomach. I had never held anything more dangerous than a butter knife in my life. "I'm not a fighter," I said, trying to voice my doubt. "You will be," Darius replied, his eyes cold but steady. "Everyone starts somewhere. This is your beginning." I took a deep breath and stepped forward, my hands shaking slightly. Darius handed me a sword, its weight unfamiliar in my grip. I looked at him, waiting for his next command. "You need to learn how to move," he said, his voice sharp. "Your stance, your balance. If you don't have control over your body, you'll lose control over everything else." He demonstrated a basic stance, his movements fluid and precise, the sword moving through the air like an extension of his body. "Like this," he instructed. I tried to mimic him, lifting the sword and trying to hold it steady. My arms trembled under the weight, but I refused to let the sword drop. Darius watched me carefully, his gaze unwavering. "You're too stiff," he said, his tone critical. "You have to. Relax. Let the sword move with you. You can't force it. The more you fight it, the harder it gets." I clenched my teeth and tried again, adjusting my posture and focusing on my breathing. Slowly, I felt myself becoming more fluid, my body responding to the sword instead of fighting against it. Darius nodded in approval. "Better," he said, his voice still firm. "But don't get too comfortable. This is just the beginning. You'll have to be faster, smarter, and more ruthless than you ever thought possible." I swallowed hard. the reality of his words sinking in. I wasn't just learning how to fight for self-defense. I was learning how to survive in a world that could kill me without a second thought. I don't know if I can do this, I said, my voice small. You will, Darius replied, his gaze sharp and unwavering. You don't have a choice. But that doesn't mean you have to be alone in this. I'll teach you everything I know. But you'll have to be willing to trust me. His words hung in the air, and for a moment, I was taken aback. Trust him? Could I trust him? After everything that had happened? But looking into his eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected, something that made me believe he wasn't just using me as a pawn in some game. Maybe, just maybe, he really did want to help me survive. I'm ready, I said, my voice steady. Darius gave a small nod and moved to the side of the room, where another crate lay. He gestured to it. Then let's move on, he said, his tone almost approving. As he opened the crate, I braced myself for whatever came next. You'll need to learn how to defend yourself in more ways than one, he said, pulling out a set of throwing knives. These, he said, handing them to me one by one, are a skill you'll need in close quarters. Not everyone will fight you face to face. Some will try to catch you off guard. And when they do, you need to be ready. I took the knives, feeling their cold steel against my palms. They were lighter than I expected, but still, they were sharp, and I could feel the weight of them. Now, aim, Darius instructed. Concentrate. Don't let your fear get in the way. I focused on the target. In front of me, a wooden board set up against the far wall. I raised my arm and threw the first knife. It missed by a few inches, but Darius didn't look disappointed. Again, he said, his voice calm. You'll get it. It's about precision, not strength. I threw the knife again, this time hitting the edge of the target. Slowly, with every throw, I became more focused. Darius didn't make a sound, but I could feel his eyes on me, studying my every move. With each attempt, I began to feel more confident. After what seemed like hours of training, I stepped back and wiped the sweat from my brow. My hands ached, my body sore, but I didn't care. I had done it. Good, Darius said, his tone almost approving. You're learning. It was a small victory, but it felt like everything. Maybe, just maybe, I could survive this. But I knew one thing for sure. The real battle was just beginning. I woke up to the sound of rain tapping lightly against the window, the soft rhythm grounding me after a restless night. I was used to the noise of the city, but now, it felt like everything outside was muffled, as though the world was far away. Inside, it was different. The weight of what Darius had taught me still hung heavy in the air. I had come so far already, but I knew this was just the beginning. I had learned to fight, to defend myself, but what came next was unknown. Would I be ready? I wasn't sure, but there was no turning back now. I pushed the covers off and stood up, my muscles aching from the training, but stronger than before. Darius had been relentless, and I had followed him, learning everything he had to teach me. But it wasn't just about surviving physical attacks. The real challenge was understanding the game. I had learned the rules of the vampire courts, how power was wielded, how alliances were formed and broken. But what good were all these lessons if I couldn't apply them? What if the knowledge wasn't enough to keep me alive? I shook my head and pushed those thoughts aside. No use dwelling on what-ifs. I had to keep moving forward. I slipped into a simple black outfit, the same one I had worn the night I met Darius. It felt like the last vestige of my old life, a life that was now far behind me. The old Maya would have just been getting up to go to her shift at the restaurant, oblivious to the new world that had engulfed her. The new Maya was someone different, someone who had to face this head-on. When I stepped into the training room, Darius was already there, his back to me as he scanned a map laid out on the table. It was a map of the vampire territories, the regions controlled by different houses. I hadn't seen it before, but I knew the names, places like Hollowbrook, the city where the Inquisitors had their stronghold, and Blackstone, the domain controlled by one of the most powerful families. We're leaving soon, Darius said without turning around. We need to move quickly. The Inquisitors are closing in on us. The words hit me like a punch. I had been expecting something like this, but hearing it out loud made it real. How soon? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. As soon as possible, Darius replied, finally turning to face me. You're ready, Maya. You've learned everything I've taught you. Now, it's time to use that knowledge. My heart pounded in my chest. What do we do now? I asked. Now, we go on the offensive, he said, his tone sharp. We can't just wait for them to come for us. We need to make our move first. I stared at him, trying to understand. What do you mean by offensive? We'll strike before they can launch their attack, he said. We'll make them think we're more powerful than we really are. We'll show them that we're not just a target, that we have the strength to fight back. I didn't like the sound of that. It felt like we were walking into a trap. And if we fail? I asked, my voice quiet. We won't fail, he said, his confidence unwavering. Not if you do exactly as I say. I nodded, my stomach churning with nerves. I had come this far, and now it was time to prove that I could handle what was coming next. I followed Darius as he moved to the far wall, where a large door stood. With a simple gesture, he opened it, revealing a set of stairs leading down into the darkness. Where are we going? I asked, my voice hesitant. To meet the others, Darius replied. We're not alone in this. There are others who are just as determined to take down the Inquisitors. We need to ally ourselves with them, or we'll never make it out of this alive. We descended the stairs into the dimly lit corridor below. The air was cool, almost damp, and it smelled faintly of earth and stone. It was like walking into a forgotten world, one that had been hidden away for centuries. As we walked deeper into the underground, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a lion's den. Who are these people? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. They're vampires who want to see the Inquisitors overthrown, Darius said. They're loyal to the old ways, not the power-hungry fools who run things now. We reached a heavy door at the end of the hallway, and Darius knocked once, firmly. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing a room filled with a dozen or more vampires. They looked like warriors, their faces hard and determined, their eyes sharp as they surveyed us. Darius stepped forward, and the room fell silent. These are our allies, he said, gesturing to the group. We'll be working together to take down the Inquisitors. One of the vampires, a tall man with dark hair and a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. And what makes you think you can trust her? He asked, his voice cold. Darius turned to him, his gaze unwavering. Because she's proven herself, he said. She's not some helpless human. She's as much a part of this fight as any of us. The tension in the room was palpable, but Darius stood firm. I could feel the weight of the moment. This was it. This was the fight that would define everything. I stepped forward, trying to match Darius's confidence. I'm ready, I said, my voice steady despite the fear creeping up inside me. The scarred vampire eyed me for a moment, then nodded. We'll see, he said. The others murmured among themselves, but I could feel their gazes lingering on me. Darius was right. I wasn't just a waitress anymore. I was in this fight now, whether I was ready or not. I had a choice, stay and fight, or walk away and face the consequences. There was only one option, and it was time to take the first step into the unknown. I stood in the dimly lit room, surrounded by the vampires who had become our uneasy allies. Their eyes studied me with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. The tension was thick enough to cut through with a knife. I could feel the weight of their gaze, as if they were waiting for me to prove myself, waiting to see if I could truly hold my own in this fight. Darius, ever the leader, stood beside me, his presence commanding. His confidence had a way of making the room feel smaller, more contained. But the tension didn't disappear. This is Maya, Darius said, his voice steady, but with an underlying edge of authority. She's the one who will help us take down the Inquisitors. The vampires exchanged glances, some of them with narrowed eyes, others skeptical but intrigued. The scarred vampire, the one who had spoken earlier, looked at me again. And why should we trust her? He asked, his voice rough, almost mocking. I felt my stomach tighten. It was the same question I had asked myself over and over since this whole thing started. Why should they trust me? I wasn't one of them. I wasn't a seasoned warrior or a vampire. I was just me. Because she's proven herself, Darius said, his gaze sharp. She helped me when I needed it, and now, she's part of this fight. That's enough. There was a long pause before the scarred vampire nodded. We'll see, he muttered, turning to face the rest of the group. The others nodded, murmuring amongst themselves. But I could see it in their eyes. They weren't convinced. And why should they be? I wasn't a trained fighter. I had barely even held a weapon until Darius showed me how to use one. But I couldn't back down now. Not when the stakes were this high. I had made my choice, and I wasn't going to let them see me fail. What's the plan? I asked, my voice firm, even though inside I was anything but confident. Darius turned to face the group, his eyes sweeping across each of them. "We need to strike at the heart of the Inquisitors," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "They won't expect us to move this quickly. We'll catch them off guard." He looked at me then, his gaze softer, almost reassuring. "Maya, you'll be with me. We'll lead the charge. The others will follow." I nodded, trying to push down the nerves rising in my chest. I didn't know if I was ready for this, but Darius seemed to believe in me, and that was enough. For now, I would follow his lead. The scarred vampire stepped forward again, his posture tense. "We'll need to be careful," he said, his voice low. "The Inquisitors are more powerful than you think. They have eyes everywhere." "We know," Darius replied, his voice unwavering. "That's why we need to be quick, precise. We hit them hard, and we hit them fast." The tension in the room thickened as the plan took shape. I listened carefully, trying to absorb every word, every detail. The idea of taking on the Inquisitors, of going to war against them, was daunting, but I knew Darius was right. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about fighting for something bigger than myself. The next few hours were a blur of preparations. The vampires moved with a purpose, gathering weapons, checking supplies, and finalizing the strategy. I trained some more, going over the basics that Darius had taught me. I wasn't great, but I was improving. It wasn't enough to just know how to fight. I had to be quick, efficient, and ruthless. If I hesitated, I could die. If I didn't move fast enough, someone else would take the fall. By the time we were ready, the tension had reached a breaking point. I could feel the weight of what we were about to do hanging over us. The plan was risky. No one in the room was pretending it wouldn't be, but we didn't have a choice. If we didn't take the first move, we risked being the ones caught off guard. I stood with Darius near the entrance to the building, the night air cold against my skin. The streets were quiet, eerily so, but I could feel the pulse of the city, the hum of the power within it. This wasn't just another night. Tonight, everything changed. Darius looked at me, his eyes sharp and calculating. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. "I am." He nodded, his expression softening for a brief moment. "Good. Stay close. Follow my lead. And don't hesitate." We moved through the streets quickly, the shadows hiding our movements. I kept my head down, my heart racing as we approached the Inquisitor's stronghold. It was an old building, worn and decaying, but there was a certain heaviness to it, as if the very walls held centuries of secrets. Darius was ahead of me, his movements silent and precise. The others were behind us, spread out, ready to move when the signal was given. We reached the entrance, and Darius motioned for me to stop. He crouched down, inspecting the door. "We'll need to move quickly once we're inside," he whispered. "No mistakes." I nodded, my throat tight with nerves. This was it, the moment we had been preparing for. With a single, swift motion, Darius pushed open the door, and we slipped inside. The air inside was cold, the smell of old wood and dust hanging in the air. We moved through the building with practiced ease, each step calculated, each breath measured. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as we approached the heart of the stronghold. The Inquisitors would be waiting for us. I didn't know what would happen once we reached them, but I knew one thing. This was the moment everything had been leading to. I had chosen to fight, and now I would face whatever came next. I could hear the faint echoes of our footsteps as we moved deeper into the stronghold. The building was eerily quiet, too quiet, as if the silence itself was watching us. My heart was racing in my chest, my nerves humming with anticipation and fear. I had no idea what was waiting for us around the next corner, but I knew one thing for sure. We couldn't turn back now. Darius was ahead, his steps soundless, his movements fluid and controlled, like he was born for this world of shadows and danger. I had to keep up. I had to prove that I was ready for whatever came next. The others were spread out behind us, each one in position, ready to act at a moment's notice. We had planned this down to the last detail, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to spiral out of control. Darius stopped suddenly, his hand shooting up in a quick, sharp motion. He signaled for me to stay close, his eyes scanning the dim hallway ahead. I couldn't see what he was looking at, but I knew it couldn't be good. "They're here," he whispered, barely audible, his voice tinged with a calm authority that I couldn't help but respect. "Stay quiet. Follow my lead." I nodded, gripping the hilt of the sword at my side, feeling its weight in my hand. My mind raced through everything Darius had taught me. The stance, the movement, the control. But none of it mattered if I couldn't stay focused. I had to block out the fear, the panic, everything. In this moment, there was only one thing that mattered: survival. We moved again, closer now to the heart of the stronghold. The silence between us was thick, but it wasn't comforting. It was a reminder that every step we took brought us closer to the unknown. We reached the large, reinforced door at the end of the hallway. I could feel the weight of what was on the other side. Danger, yes, but something more. Power. Control. This was it. We were about to face the Inquisitors, and I didn't know if I was ready. Darius didn't hesitate. He kicked the door open with one swift motion, his eyes already scanning the room beyond. The Inquisitors were waiting for us. They stood in the shadows, their faces obscured by the dim light, but their eyes gleamed with malice. My breath caught in my throat. There were at least a dozen of them, all dressed in dark clothing, their weapons glinting in the low light. They moved like predators, their every motion calculating, deliberate. And in the center of them stood the leader, a tall man with pale skin and eyes that were as cold as ice. I could feel the air grow heavier as he stepped forward, his gaze locking onto Darius. "You've come," the leader said, his voice smooth, almost mocking. "I knew it wouldn't be long before you made your move." Darius stepped forward, his hand never leaving the hilt of his sword. "You've been a thorn in my side for far too long," he said, his voice low and controlled. "This ends tonight." The Inquisitor leader smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "You think you can stop us?" he asked, his voice almost laughing. "We are the law, Darius. You've never had the power to stop us." Darius didn't flinch. "I'm not alone anymore," he said, his eyes flicking to me for a brief moment. "And I'll make sure you regret underestimating us." The tension in the room thickened, the weight of the moment pressing down on us. I could feel the battle coming, the impending clash between our group and the Inquisitors. Darius was right. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about reclaiming control, taking back what the Inquisitors had stolen. "Get ready," Darius muttered, his hand tightening around his sword. I could feel the shift in the air, the moment before everything erupted. Then, without warning, the Inquisitors moved. They lunged at us, their weapons flashing through the air, but Darius was faster. His sword sliced through the air with precision, cutting down the nearest Inquisitor before he could even raise his weapon. I barely had time to react before one of them came at me, a dagger raised high. My instincts kicked in, and I parried the blow with my sword, feeling the shock of the impact rattle through my arms. I stepped back, keeping my eyes on my opponent. He was quick, skilled, but I had something he didn't. I had learned. I had the advantage of the training Darius had given me. I countered with a quick strike, aiming for his side, but he dodged, his eyes filled with contempt. "You're still just a human," he sneered. "You can't win. Watch me." I growled, my determination hardening. I didn't need to be a vampire to fight. I just needed to survive. The fight raged around me, but I kept my focus on the Inquisitor in front of me. He tried to slash at me again, but I moved faster, cutting his weapon from his hand and stepping in for the final blow. The Inquisitor fell to the ground, his body limp. I didn't look back to see if the others were faring as well. I knew Darius would handle them. He was a warrior. This was his world. But this was my fight too now. As the last of the Inquisitors fell, the room fell into silence. The leader stood, watching us with a cold, calculating expression. "You think you've won?" he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You've only made it worse for yourselves." "We'll see," Darius said, his voice low but filled with resolve. "This is far from over." The leader didn't respond, his eyes narrowing. And just like that, he was gone, disappearing into the shadows, leaving us with the broken bodies of his fallen soldiers. I could feel the tension lingering in the air, but something had changed. We had survived, and this was just the beginning. I stood in the aftermath, the room still thick with tension. The Inquisitors had been defeated for now, but I knew it wasn't over. Darius had made that clear. The way he carried himself, so composed, so focused, told me that this was just another step in a long, dangerous war. I looked around at the fallen bodies of the Inquisitors, the cold silence of their defeat hanging in the air. The victory didn't feel like one. It felt like a temporary relief, a small respite before the real storm hit. Darius turned to face me, his expression hard, but with a flicker of something. Satisfaction, maybe. You did well, he said, his voice low, almost approving. But this is only the beginning. You've learned how to fight, but now you need to learn how to think. In this world, strategy is just as important as strength. I nodded, though the weight of his words sunk in deeper than I wanted to admit. The physical training had been hard, but it had been straightforward. The strategy, the thinking, it was something I wasn't sure I could fully grasp. What do we do now? I asked, my voice steady, though I couldn't quite hide the uncertainty. Now, we move, Darius said, his gaze sweeping over the room. We can't stay here. The Inquisitors will report back. They'll know we've come for them, and they'll come after us with everything they have. I felt my stomach drop. It was a terrifying thought, being hunted like that. But I had no choice. I was already too deep in this. Where do we go? I asked. We need to meet with the others, Darius said. There are more of us, people who want to see the Inquisitors destroyed. We'll form alliances, and we'll plan our next move. But we have to move quickly. Every moment we waste, the Inquisitors grow stronger. I didn't ask who the others were. At this point, it didn't matter. I was part of this now, and I had to stay focused. We quickly gathered our things, making sure the fallen Inquisitors' weapons were collected. Darius was already planning the next move, his mind working in ways I couldn't follow. We slipped out of the building under the cover of night, our footsteps silent as we moved through the dark streets. The city seemed different now, the shadows feeling deeper, the air colder. I had always thought of the city as my home, but now, it felt like a place full of secrets I was only beginning to understand. We reached a hidden passageway, one I had never seen before. It was narrow, the walls lined with stone that felt ancient. The others were waiting there, their faces shadowed but serious. Darius gave a quick nod to one of them, a tall, dark-haired man who stepped forward. We've been expecting you, the man said. His voice was low but with a certain authority to it. We need to talk strategy. Darius didn't waste time with pleasantries. We've hit them once, he said, his voice calm, but there was a steel edge to it. Now we need to hit them harder. We'll strike at their base. We know where they're hiding, and we can take them by surprise. It's risky, the man said. They'll have defenses. We'll be walking into a trap. If we wait, they'll trap us first, Darius replied, his gaze unwavering. We move now, or we risk everything. The others nodded, murmuring amongst themselves. The tension in the room was palpable, and I could feel the weight of their gazes on me. I wasn't just Darius's ally anymore. I was part of this group, part of this fight. What do you need me to do? I asked, my voice steady. Darius turned to me, his eyes sharp, but not unkind. You stay with us. You're not alone in this fight. His words should have been reassuring, but they weren't. I wasn't sure if I could be strong enough, smart enough, to keep up with all of them. But I didn't have a choice. I had already made my decision. Let's move, Darius said, his tone final. We don't have much time. The group moved with practiced efficiency, gathering their weapons and making sure we were prepared for whatever came next. I didn't ask where we were going. I knew the fight wasn't over. I could feel it in my bones. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about changing everything. We made our way through the hidden corridors, the cold stone walls surrounding us, blocking out the world outside. The farther we went, the more I realized how much I had yet to learn. I wasn't just fighting for my life anymore. I was fighting for something bigger. I didn't know what the outcome would be, but I knew this much. I wasn't going down without a fight. We reached a small room, far below the surface of the city, and Darius turned to face me. This is where it gets dangerous, he said quietly. Are you ready for this? I looked at him, my mind swirling with doubt, but I nodded. I'm ready. Darius nodded once, then turned to the others. This is it. We make our stand here. I could feel the weight of the moment settling in, but there was no turning back now. We had made it this far, and we weren't about to stop. This was the fight of our lives, and I was in it until the end. The room was thick with tension, the air heavy with the weight of what we were about to do. We had made our stand, and now, there was no turning back. Darius stood in the center, his eyes scanning the group, his expression unreadable. The others were gathered around him, silent and focused, preparing for the battle that was moments away. This was it, the moment we had been preparing for. I had come a long way from the frightened waitress I once was. The woman who had no idea how to fight, how to protect herself. Now, I was standing here, ready to face whatever came next, ready to take on the Inquisitors. Darius's voice broke the silence, steady and commanding. "We strike now," he said, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. "We hit them where it hurts. We make them feel our power." His words sparked something in me, an understanding that this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about fighting back. This was about taking control. I had to be ready for whatever was coming. I had no choice. I took a deep breath, my fingers tightening around the handle of my sword. It had become more than just a weapon to me. It was a symbol of everything I had learned, everything I had fought for. It was my lifeline. We moved as one, a well-oiled machine, our steps synchronized, our movements swift and purposeful. The stronghold we were about to enter was crawling with Inquisitors. They would be waiting for us, but we were ready. We had trained for this, and I had learned more than I ever thought possible. As we approached the entrance, the tension in the air grew thicker. I could feel my heartbeat in my chest, my nerves alive and buzzing. This wasn't a game anymore. It was real. We weren't just fighting for our lives. We were fighting for something bigger. Darius stopped in front of the door, motioning for us to be silent. He looked at each of us, his eyes sharp. "Stay focused," he said. "We make our move quickly and efficiently. No mistakes." We nodded, each of us understanding the stakes. The door creaked open, and we slipped inside, our movements fluid, like shadows. The room beyond was dark, the faintest trace of light coming from the torches along the walls. I could hear the soft rustle of clothing, the whisper of voices, Inquisitors. They were here, and they were waiting for us. Darius moved first, his sword cutting through the air with a precision I had come to expect from him. His movements were flawless, a blur of speed and power. The Inquisitors barely had time to react before they were on the ground, their bodies crumpling under his attack. I followed, my own sword drawn, my body moving without hesitation. I could hear the clash of weapons, the shouts of the Inquisitors as they tried to fight back, but I didn't pause. I didn't think. I just moved. My body had learned what to do. And now, it was my turn to fight. The first Inquisitor came at me, his dagger raised high, but I was ready. I sidestepped his attack, my sword flashing through the air, and with one swift motion, I brought it down on his arm, disarming him. He tried to scramble back, but I was faster. I closed the distance between us, my sword aimed at his chest. His eyes widened in fear as he realized there was no escape. He collapsed to the ground, his body lifeless. I didn't have time to feel anything. There was no time for hesitation. The next Inquisitor lunged at me, and I blocked his attack, twisting my sword to knock his weapon away. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I followed through with a strike, hitting him in the side. He staggered back, his breath labored. "You're good," he gasped, his voice full of disbelief. But not good enough. Before he could strike again, I moved in, my sword cutting across his throat. He fell to the ground, his life slipping away in an instant. The battle raged around me, but I didn't stop. I kept moving, kept fighting. I could hear Darius's voice in the distance, commanding, guiding us. The Inquisitors were relentless, but we were relentless too. I fought harder than I ever thought I could. And slowly, with every swing of my sword, I began to feel like I belonged here. Like I was no longer just the scared girl in the shadows. I was a part of this fight. The last of the Inquisitors fell, their bodies littered across the floor, their blood staining the stone beneath us. I stood there, breathing heavily, my sword dripping with the remnants of the battle. The room fell silent, save for the sound of our heavy breathing. Darius stood at the far end of the room, his eyes scanning the aftermath, his expression unreadable. He nodded once, his approval silent, but clear. "We've won this battle," he said quietly, but I could see the fire in his eyes. "But the war is far from over." The words hung in the air, a reminder that this was just the beginning. We had taken a step forward, but the Inquisitors would not be easily defeated. There would be more battles to fight, more dangers to face. But I was ready. For the first time, I felt like I was truly part of this world. This was my fight too now, and I would see it through to the end. Vampire stories have always captivated audiences, drawing them into a world of intrigue, danger, and power. In this gripping tale, we follow a young woman who is thrust into the dangerous and mysterious world of vampires. As she learns to survive, she uncovers dark secrets, forges alliances, and discovers her own strength. With the looming threat of the Inquisitors, a ruthless faction bent on destroying everything, she must navigate a world where the stakes are higher than ever. This vampire story explores themes of survival, loyalty, and the complex balance of power. Through intense battles and heart-stopping moments, our protagonist fights not just for her life, but for the future of the vampire world itself. As she grows stronger and more determined, the story becomes a thrilling journey of self-discovery and courage. With every twist and turn, this vampire story keeps readers on the edge of their seats, eager to find out what happens next. Whether you are a fan of dark fantasy, thrilling action, or the classic vampire lore, this story delivers all the elements that make vampire stories so unforgettable.